Greetings to our audience and everyone who is interested in discussions related to the United Nations and human rights. Today, we have the honor to talk to Professor Milena Dragićević Šešić and ask her about her extensive experience working with the United Nations, but also in the academics regarding um, the international arena and how different countries interact with each other within the frameworks defined by the United Nations. We're going to specifically talk about UNESCO's cultural diplomacy today between global ideas and geopolitical realities, the challenges that we face, and possibly the solutions that we can come up with in order to make the world a better place for the citizens and for geopolitics as well. So I would like to ask you, based on your direct experience within UNESCO, or UNESCO's advisory body, do you see the organization more as a mediator of dialogue or a mirror that reflects global power asymmetrics? Could you share maybe one concrete example of where UNESCO successfully transcended geopolitical pressures and maybe one where it failed to do so?
In fact, the question is excellent because UNESCO is both. It is mirroring the reality of geopolitical situations, of strengths, powers, and so on. And it's much easier sometimes that ideas coming from the global superpowers, from EU and so on, goes through UNESCO further up and spreads on the whole earth. But at the same time, it is a mediator. It tries its best, not always with success, to mediate in, states in conflicts and so on, although sometimes it do not dare to raise issues that are so clearly oppositely seen by some superpowers or important regional powers in some part of the world. So I have also many examples of these situations when sometimes even for us UNESCO experts that we might have also our individual stance, professional stance, but we have, I will just quote one small, not as example now, but writing some reports, analysis about the state of intercultural dialogue in Europe, I severely criticize two EU countries and giving examples of legal issues that are not solved. Not usually it is legally everything is perfect, but in reality it might be different.
So, can you please maybe share from your own experience one concrete example where UNESCO successfully transcended geopolitical pressure and maybe one where it failed to do so?
Let's say that global north in this case, although it shouldn't be very controversial, is mostly on the side of Japan, although Nanjing massacres are really well documented, and it was about documents, not about interpretation of the event. So, although and in spite of everything, somehow UNESCO navigated in this process. Japanese government protested quite a lot. In other smaller cases from my region, we assisted one attempt of regional UNESCO office in Venice to help reconciliation of Balkan countries by linking national history museums in one project called Reimagining the Balkans. And I remember that all of us, when we heard about the project, I mean, museologists, cultural workers, academics, we've been really, how to say, delighted to see that UNESCO wanted to interfere and to mediate in between national public institutions that often just are mirroring their government policies. And very often their, let's say, permanent exhibitions are reflecting, for example, present day government ideology, not only like general official cultural ideology of the which dominates in this state. 20th century was difficult issue because of relatively recent past and Serbian-Croatian conflicts, relations during World War II. So the choice was on 19th century, when all of these countries, in fact, gained their, not all of them, but nearly all of them raised their national issues. And some of them, like Greece, Serbia, etc., got their national independence. So out of 12 museums from 12 countries, it was the Turkish Museum, National Museum, who immediately withdrew after the first meeting when they realized that it's going to be really more or less, because that's how others presented what 19th century raised of national feelings, etc., etc. When the Turkish Museum, the UNESCO officers realized that the issue is going to be tough. So they try to negotiate that this 19th century will have more general topic, like culture of the everyday life, like culture of the coffee, rituals, family life, everything that might be uh, approaching people of the Balkans and not dividing them.
So I would like to ask you, drawing on your extensive field experience, what conditions do you think are necessary for UNESCO's cultural interventions in post-conflict societies to move beyond symbolic gestures and achieve genuine social and political impact? In other words, how can cultural agency be returned to local communities so that our culture becomes a process of emancipation and healing, not just a tool of bureaucratic reporting?
I have to say that the moment after finishing the conflict in former Yugoslavian countries, UNESCO did several great projects, but only those that were really huge symbolical gestures, like three religious heritage reconstruction projects, which means Orthodox Cathedral in Mostar, Ferhadia Mosque in Banja Luka, and Franciscan Monastery in Derventa, nearby Derventa, which means sacral objects of three confession. That was given huge publicity. What was the problem was that these reconstructions were done in cities from where the population of that faith was expelled, like Muslim population from Banja Luka. So there is not anymore believers that are there are few, but it's not a huge community, like there is no more Orthodox population, Christian Orthodox in Mostar, or there is no more Croats in Derventa and so on due to the war and displacement of the population. Or another program that I was very honored to be invited to participate was about establishing intercultural dialogues. And we had two seminars. My colleague, late colleague Sanjin Dragojević from Croatia and me, we were leading seminars in raising intercultural skills and sensitivities in Bosnia, only for the Bosnian youth citizens. And both of us, we understood that that was the most difficult seminar we have ever led. One was happening in Mostar, the other one in Sarajevo with the same group of youth. And it really not only opened our eyes about deepness of trauma unhealed in all three population, and especially among those who were very young, 4, 5, maximum 10 in the moment of the war and so on, real moment of the war, but raised in the ambience of the hatred toward other and how would say disappointment. Each were disappointed for different reasons by international community. So I would say, to respond directly on your question, that UNESCO needs long-term, not just one seminar, 2 seminars and so on, but long-term activities of really with communities, with local communities, with the trainers who are from the region, not coming from important countries, speaking perfectly English and so on, but having no understanding, not only about values of those communities and how would say about opinions, statements, about feelings, what is hurting them, but even sometimes about basic history of the region to understand the problems and so on. When you say the word colonialism in Europe, in global north, it usually refers only to Western colonial countries. And it's only now that some people or some scholars started to understand that Ottoman Empire was also colonial empire, and that Tsarist Russia was, and then later on in a different way, but Soviet Union also, as we can see now with the war which distort Ukraine completely. Haven't you been in the same position? Was my first question in Cambodia when I was sent as UNESCO expert, like Vietnam as a French colony. They looked at me and say, not at all. Vietnam got from French colonial system education and administration and so on. But even French colonial rule didn't have a big interest in Cambodia because, first of all, we are too small country at that time, totally under rainforest and so on. You have to learn a lot where you are going as UNESCO expert, and you have to have a quite lot of knowledge support, and that is something that I would say needs to be more developed in all international organizations, not only UNESCO. This knowledge transfer that was gained by one group of experts going somewhere and so on stays as part of institutional memory and be transferred to new generation of experts and so on, not that it would discover from the zero everything.
In your opinion, or do you agree with the view that UNESCO's state-centered governance model is no longer actually adequate for addressing phenomena such as digital imperialism? Or if so, what kind of multi-stakeholder governance engaging artists, digital platforms, and civil society do you envision as a viable framework for protecting cultural diversity in the 21st century?
I have to say that UNESCO is addressing those issues quite a lot on the level of so-called reflection groups. And I was part of one of the reflection group on cultural development in the digital realm. And a lot of, I would say, new perspectives have been introduced and debated, but yet still we have to find instruments to fight against, let's say, globalization processes. If I come, and I'm not, but if I come from a country like Estonia with less than 2 million people who read Estonian language, how many universities in the world will subscribe to this journal? Do you know any that has a department of Estonian language? And how many exist in the world? It's tens of thousands of universities around the world that have Anglophone departments of English language and literature. So we are not the same. And it cannot be, and some for small languages, preferential treatments has to be allowed. It never happened. The result of our research was that no big country really used preferential treatment as a measure. They might invite some artists paid for their, but that doesn't mean anything on the market level to raise the how to say, market on the global level, to be more inclusive toward writers, filmmakers, and so on from smaller countries. Now, this reflection group on culture in digital environment had opened very sensitive questions about creative industries in minority languages and about possibility to find material in minority languages on the in the digital arena, on different platforms, and so on. Digital churn represents a huge risk for further globalization, for further, I would say, dominance of one language. It's not necessarily English, because in Latin America, it's a dominance of Spanish language, which killed basically all the native languages, because it's not even enough today to say they are free to do whatever they want. It's not enough. These processes has to be supported by public policies, by educational, not only even cultural, but educational, cultural, media policies, etc., so that culture becomes really, truly human rights. And I see that as an important task of UNESCO. I remember first time when I heard it was in 1995, UNESCO conference in Moscow, that people coming from Siberia raised this issue. Are you aware that our languages, every day, one of our languages is dying? But there was, at that moment, there was no official response of UNESCO by, for example, only a representative of Serbia, Jovan Cirilov, who was also, among other things, a poet. He made a poem about conference and exactly about those issues. But now I see appearance of the new documents, for example, also related to artificial intelligence, ethics, algorithms, because for my profession, cultural management, algorithms are terribly dangerous, as they are dangerous for democracy. Why? Because they are further dividing populations, because they are sending you only through your computer only those things that are for you interesting. So you are now prevented to hear other opinions, and so the people stays more in the groups of people of same values and thoughts than before. And on the other side, the algorithms are seeing attractiveness or possibilities or some populist or vulgar, of any kind of messages that would attract
curiosity, of sensationalism of the population, and send exactly those messages